and welcome to the most smokin' hot episode of the Dohyo to date. We're hot, because we're talking about all the hot Ozeki prospects over the next year, and we're smoking because a large portion of the Southwest is on fire. Sothro!
Roll the salt, get in the ring. Welcome to the Dohyo.
Hello and welcome back to the Dohyo here on Mr. J-Wag's channel. We are still here in Ivins, Utah, as we will be till the end of October. I will be performing the role of Dewey Finn in School of Rock the Musical. We have just opened, things are going awesome. If you are in the area, come on down. As I did mention in the cold open, we are having some wildfires out here. We had our very first show ever canceled because of smoke. That was fun. And so yeah, if you're starting wildfires, stop. But we're hoping for clear skies and good times from here on out, so check out the link and come on down. Now, before we get to our potential Ozeki, we have a few sumo shoutouts. Our first sumo shoutout is a shoutout we have done before, but I feel the need to do it again. Whenever I feel the need to start running data sets in and about sumo, I now do a Google search because we seem to be at that point in sumo English language coverage where a lot of people are doing these sort of statistical breakdowns. And more often than not, someone has already done the breakdown I'm looking to do. So a special shout out to Tachiai.org. We of course know them as one of the premier English language sumo sites on the web. Go check them out if you haven't. Their coverage is excellent. They do daily coverage of every basho. But specifically I will be thanking them for their article, A Brief History of Ozeki Runs, which gave me a great deal of information for today's episode. I will link that below. Check it out. And one more special shout out for those of you, like me, are in the Venn diagram of sumo fans and music theater fans. Half of the Sumo KABOOM podcast, Leslie Collins, will be starring in the musical Fun Home in Dallas, Texas, at the Uptown Players from August 20th to 29th. So if you're interested and in the Dallas area, please go support that show. It's an amazing show, and I'm sure Leslie's going to be doing an amazing job in it. So go check it out here at uptownplayers.org. Sumo shoutouts. So, today's episode is about who could possibly be the next Ozeki in sumo. I bring this up because we seem to be in a position where we may be running out of Ozeki pretty soon. We have just lost one Ozeki to promotion. Terunofuji is now Yokozuna, the rank he will hold for the rest of his career. We have just lost an Ozeki in Asanoyama. He's going to be out for at least 5 more basho and then have to work his way back up. So we will not be seeing him at Ozeki at any point in at least the next 2 years. And that leaves us with 2 current Ozeki, one, Taka Keisho, who can't seem to stay healthy for longer than, say, 3 basho in a row, and one, Shodai, who doesn't seem to be able to consistently get past the 8 wins. So, as many of you already know, in sumo, we do not need to have Yokozuna, but we do need to have Ozeki. So if we do run out of Ozeki, that means we need to make our Yokozuna, Yokozuna-Ozeki. This happened fairly recently, where we only had 1 Ozeki on the Bansuke, and Kakaryu was demoted-ish, is it a demotion? To Yokozuna Ozeki. But even in that case, we may be running out of Yokozuna pretty soon. Basically, the longevity of our 2 Yokozuna is right now down to 4 very, very injured joints on these 2 men. And however long those joints are going to last is as long as we are going to have these Yokozuna. So I think it'll be very, very interesting to see who our next crop of Ozeki will be. So when it comes down to criteria for Ozeki, the standard seems to be 33 wins over 3 consecutive tournaments, no make koshi, and you spend at least 2 of those tournaments in the Sanyaku. Well, if you look at the Tachiai blog article I've linked below, you'll see that sometimes we have Ozeki make it with 28 wins, and sometimes it takes them up to 37 wins. 28 we discussed in the Tamano Umi episode, where Kitano Fuji and Tamano Umi with 2 Fusen wins ended up getting only 28 wins in the ring and were promoted to Ozeki. And most recently, Tochi Noshin had 37 wins in his Ozeki run. I mean, I'm sure he probably would have gotten with slightly fewer, but he wasn't going to stop winning. So, 28 to 37 wins, hanging out in the Sanyaku and the Joy, and preferably you have at least 1 Yusho or very close Jun Yusho in there. So right now, the only two wrestlers I would say were even close to starting an official Ozeki run would be Ichinojo with 10 wins at Maegashira 2, and Sekiwake Mitakeumi with 8 wins, but he's already up there at Sekiwake. Now, in order for either of these men to get Ozeki, they would have to have incredibly good tournaments, like I said before, probably at least one Yusho or Jun Yusho between them. But, barring some amazing tournaments from those two men, we are not going to see our first Ozeki before next year. So I've gone through the Bansuke and I've sort of looked through anyone I thought might possibly have the skill level mixed with the amount of youth to be able to get to Ozeki in the next year or so. I've divided them into 5 groups, the first group being the obvious. I'm calling them the obvious because they have both won either multiple Yusho or Jun Yusho, and they've been in the Sanyaku for a really long time. That is Mitakeumi and Takayasu. Now Mitakeumi, under 30, he's a Christmas baby, so he'll be turning 30 this Christmas. He already has 2 Yusho under his belt, but has never quite been able to get over the hump to that Ozeki rank. And as Tachiai pointed out a little while ago, if he had made Ozeki in any of his previous, I think 3 Ozeki runs, he'd still be an Ozeki today with the records he's put up. But since his last Yusho in September of 2019, he's only managed to put up 3 double-digit wins up in the Sanyaku, with a maximum of 11 wins. So for Mitakeumi to make Ozeki, shy of a couple Yokozuna retiring and us running out of Ozeki, Mitakeumi would have to sort of flank a Yusho or a very close Jun Yusho with some double-digit wins, which he's capable of doing, he's just never been able to string it together. Now Takayasu, of course, has already been an Ozeki before an elbow injury from Tamawashi, and he has tumbled back down the Bansuke, but has now worked his way back up into the Sanyaku, where he seems to be fitting very, very well in sort of that secondary Sanyaku area. Now he's 2 years older than Mitakeumi, he has 4 Jun Yusho, but never won a Yusho, and his last one was November of 2018 while he was still an Ozeki. And since he has made his comeback from the injury, he has not gotten more than 10 wins in a tournament. And in fact, Takayasu has never gotten 13 or more wins in a tournament, which is sort of what is considered the Yokozuna equivalent of Yusho win. So the essential question with these two wrestlers is, have they hit their ceiling? Is there another gear there, or can they just put together the consistency we have seen before and get to the 33-ish win mark? Failing that, is the top of the Bansuke weak/injury prone enough that these 3 guys just having 3 pretty good tournaments in a row would be enough to bump them up to Ozeki? Let me know. Alright, next category. Veterans with consistency issues. The first name on the list will not surprise anyone, Hokuto Fuji. Now, I don't think it's an insult to call Hokuto Fuji inconsistent, as in some matches, he can't even consistently get his arms and his legs working in the same direction. But he is an incredibly talented rikishi and has 7 kinboshi, which tells me when he is wrestling his best, he is one of the best wrestlers on the Dohyo. But consistent is not something you could ever use to describe him. Hokuto Fuji has gotten 11 wins in the Joy on 3 separate occasions, but he's never gotten a Kachikoshi while in the Sanyaku. And in fact, he's never gotten Kachikoshi 3 tournaments in a row in Makuuchi, which to me would sort of disqualify him from Ozeki ranks, because if you can't even get Kachikoshi 3 in a row, how are you going to excel 3 enough to get to an Ozeki run? So this to me takes sort of Hokuto Fuji off the list. But it does lead me to our next vet with consistency issues, Daisho. Now, similar to Hokuto Fuji, he's a pusher thruster, and naturally that is a more chaotic style of sumo, so it's harder to be a little bit more consistent when you are primarily a pusher thruster. Takakeisho fans, give a what? Now, while Hokuto Fuji is 29, Daisho is only 27. He also has a Yusho under his belt, which he got 13 wins in. He had that incredible streak where he beat the entirety of the Sanyaku in order. And since the beginning of 2020, he has been in the Joy and the Sanyaku regularly. This all looks really cool, but then the consistency issues come up. He's had 3 Basho with double-digit wins, which is awesome. He had a special prize, yay, and a Yusho, like I said. But he's also had 4 Makekoshi in that exact same time period, along with 2 double-digit loss Basho. Now, another strike against both of these guys is that they don't really have great head-to-head records against what I would call the settled Sanyaku. Guys like Takayasu, Mitakayumi, Shodai, Terunofuji, and Takakeisho. They have losing records against all these guys except Daieisho versus Shodai. So if they're going to start an Ozeki run, they're going to need to start beating these guys fairly regularly to be able to string together these double-digit wins. All right, number 3. Veterans who've had injury issues, but maybe can find a new gear. Now, these are a few veterans who have all made the Sanyaku before, but because of injury issues have not been able to stay up there. First, Endo. Now, the thing with Endo is he has those occasional basho where he just does so good and gets double-digit wins, but then can't quite keep it up. Right now, he's over 30. He doesn't seem to be able to stay healthy. He's been Kyujo for 3 of the last 6. He's only had 1 Kachikoshi in the Sanyaku, and that was only 8 wins. And he's only had 1 double-digit win basho up in the Joy. So this tells me he's not a guy who's going to be able to put 3 together, especially at his age. I mean, I said I'm 42, but I'm not fighting people every day. Then we have another guy who we may not consider a veteran, but Onosho. Now, for those of you who don't remember Onosho in 2017, he got 3 consecutive 10-win tournaments, blasted through the Maegashira ranks, and made Komusubi. Then he hung out at Komusubi for a tournament, got 1 Kachikoshi, and then he got hurt. He has never been quite the same since. He's still young enough to be able to pull off a comeback, especially with the comebacks we've seen from like Terunofuji and Ura. But he seems to have a different ceiling than he did back then. His balance isn't quite the same. Nothing I've seen in the past year tells me Onosho is ready for an Ozeki run. Now, Takanosho is only 26. He has a winning record against some of those guys I was mentioning who we consider the upper Sanyaku, including Terunofuji. But he has that ACL injury that he's been fighting through, but he's never really had that tournament up in the Sanyaku where we're like, this guy's a contender. He's going to be in it on the last day. In fact, he's only had 1 double-digit win tournament in the Joy/Sanyaku area. So, does he have enough time before his knee gives out to be able to creep his way up into 3 consecutive dominant basho? And there's one more, and this man has never been on the Sanyaku, but he is a personal favorite of mine, and he is returning from injury. Ura! Now, I'm giving Ura a lot of the benefit of the doubt here because he is 29, which is on the older side for this, and he has Terunofuji-esque joint injuries in his lower body. But he also has only 2 Makekoshi in sumo that do not come from Kyujo. In his entire career, only 2 Makekoshi. Yes, his highest rank is Maegashira 4, but he is currently coming off of 3 consecutive 10-win tournaments. And there was a controversial hair pull in the last one. Of course, the thing with Ura is that since he's only made it up to the Joy, I think, once in his entire career, we don't really have much head-to-head with him versus any of these other people. But I think Ura has spent enough time refining his technique in every division of sumo that he might be able to slide in there and have that really dominant year we've all been hoping he would have. Alright, my last injured vet with new gear. Ichinojo. Now, everyone seems to think Ichinojo is much older than he is because he's been around forever and he looks kind of like a large Mongolian tree. But he's only 28. He has recovered apparently from his shoulder injury. He's lost a bunch of weight. He looks much more mobile than he has in the past. We don't see nearly as much of the sleepy Nojo as we used to. And we seem to forget that Ichinojo has 2 Jun Yusho, a 14-win and a 13-win. And he lost both of those tournaments to Hakuho. Now, when we were talking about Mitakayumi, we said he had 2 Yusho. Both of those Yusho came when Hakuho was Kyujo. So, if we're talking about just a sheer matter of luck, we would be talking about Ichinojo possibly in the same breath as we'd be talking about Mitakayumi. A guy who has spent a bunch of time in the Sanyaku. He spent 8 tournaments at Sekiwake, 2 at Komusubi. He has 2 Jun Yusho under his belt, and he's shown the dominance necessary to get 13-14 wins, which needs to be sort of the crown jewel of an Ozeki run, hopefully. So the question with Ichinojo is, since he's made his way back up into Makauchi, he's been getting 7 to 10 wins just in that area and slowly working his way up. I don't think he's going to make Sanyaku this time just because of how the demotions are going to work out. So the question is, does he have enough left in the tank to push forward and get like a 13-14 win basho, as we have seen him do before. I discussed this all in the Shadow of Hakuho. Check it out. In our last Shadow of Hakuho episode, Ichinojo does in fact get the Yusho in the absence of Hakuho. And since we brought this up with Hokuto Fuji, Ichinojo is the current active leader in Kinboshi with 8. Again, only 28.